All right, so you guys have been learning all about 1776, right? Yes. All right, wonderful. So today actually is a great day to talk about all of this, because not only is it the anniversary of the Battle of Carillon, but come 1776, this is the exact day that the Army starts to show up here at Ticonderoga. Of course, what has happened is an army has, throughout the spring of 1776, has been retreating out of Canada after a failed expedition to capture or liberate, however you want to phrase it, Canada. And they're retreating all the way down here, looking for a spot to make their stance. Of course, the best ground to do this is 10 miles north of here at Crown Point, which of course offers great ground looking to the north of the lake. However, when they arrive at Crown Point, they bring all of the soldiers there. That army, of course, is very sick with things like dysentery, typhoid, as well as smallpox, which is the real struggle. So the decision is made on July 7th, 1776, to leave Crown Point and come down here to Ticonderoga. So that army starts moving right away, but what they do is they quarantine all the smallpox victims down at the southern end of Lake George. So once the army starts to arrive here, it also starts to be reinforced with new troops coming from New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and the Vermont area, which was then the New Hampshire Grants. The Army, throughout the summer of 1776, is going to swell to about 10,000 soldiers, making Ticonderoga the 5th largest city in the colonies that year, just larger than Newport, Rhode Island. Now, feeding 10,000 soldiers is going to be quite a task. So you will have to, of course, have a very strong supply line. An army is not going to be self-sufficient. It's going to be relying on people to make a supply line, bringing all the supplies it needs up to them and issuing out to that army. So you have your general commissary, Commissary Yancey, down in Albany, although he's up here as well, where the main public and continental stores of the Northern Department of the Continental Army is situated. That commissary department are going to contract individuals from all across the colonies, anywhere from the Philadelphia area in Pennsylvania, from the Hudson Highlands, and even the Mohawk River Valley, from the New Hampshire Grants, and even from Massachusetts and Connecticut. These contractors are contracted to supply this army with flour and beef, mainly. So you have contractors going out, or you have purchasing agents going out, contracting people to grow wheat or to simply sell them wheat. You have that wheat being transported to grist mills that they've contracted to turn that wheat into flour, and then all of those barrels of flour are then shipped either to Albany or straight up here, depending on where they are. You also have barrels of salted pork being shipped up here in the same kind of manner, going out, contracting the pork, and then having it packaged in Albany, having those barrels of pork come on up here to Ticonderoga. You also have beef on the way up here as well. And that beef is being driven up here mainly on the hoof. A constant flow coming up the road, coming all the way into the old fort here at Ticonderoga, where the beef will be slaughtered as well as butchered and packaged here in the old fort. If you were here in 1776, what you would see down here in this bay are hundreds of bateaux, these 20-foot long boats that are making trips up the Lachute River, getting supplies that are being brought from Fort George all the way down Lake George. And then, of course, there are bateaux at the southern end of Lake George, but also bateaux on the Hudson River, bringing all these supplies up from Albany. So you have this huge supply line that will end here at Ticonderoga, bringing all of these barrels of beef and flour so that this army can eat. All of the flour and all of the beef and all of the pork, all of this is going to be brought in here to the old French fort. This is what is acting as the commissary department up here at Ticonderoga. These are the Ticonderoga stores. This fort is not in great shape in the Revolution. It's half blown up, it is rotted and crumbled. It's what they call the old French fort. However, it has useful large buildings inside and a nice general location between the forts at Mount Hope and across the lake at Mount Independence. So it's a great place to store all of the Army's supplies. That's why all the beef is also being slaughtered and butchered in this space. Now, we talked about just beef and flour being issued to the soldiers. And that's what soldiers here get on a daily basis. Either about a pound of beef and a pound of flour, or 3/4 of a pound of salted pork and a pound of flour. That's all they're going to get. Now, that's not what they're promised. By joining the Continental Army, you are supposed to be getting not only that, but also 3 pints of peas or beans per week. You're also supposed to be getting rice or Indian meal, as well as milk, as well as candles and soap and other things of that nature that a soldier might need. They're not seeing any of these other items because this army is so large and they can only buy so much. So they're buying the basics. The basics is great. It's supplying them with calories to get all the work done, but it's not great for one reason. What's the problem if you just eat beef and flour? Scurvy and other sicknesses. An army that's already sick is going to need vegetables to keep them healthy. Now, there is a garden down below the fort that the French built in 1756. It's a 6-acre garden. That is not going to be large enough to supply 10,000 soldiers with vegetables. Matter of fact, those vegetables are most likely going to the regimental hospitals here at Ticonderoga, as well as the general hospital where the smallpox victims are quarantined, to get those soldiers healthy again so that they can get back to work here building this line of fortifications here at Ticonderoga. So how are the 10,000 soldiers getting fresh vegetables to stay healthy? Well, luckily, when you have 10,000 soldiers in an area, you have that large city. And you have a lot of people wanting to make money off of these soldiers. So you have what the Army are referring to as traders and hucksters coming into camp, filling bateaux up with produce and goods to sell to the Army. So many of these individuals will come into this camp, the Army moves to regulate it in September of 1776, moving the location of the public market up onto the glacis of the fort. They will regulate the prices. They will also regulate the hours so that no spirituous liquors are being sold at late hours. They will also regulate the currency being used at that market. Only being able to use continental currency, meaning you can't use hard silver coin, which of course you can, if the soldiers have that, they would be able to buy a lot more things in the market with that. Now, what's being sold at that market is a mix of different things. Anywhere from game meats to any kind of root vegetables, things like potatoes and turnips, corn. You also have more flour and cornmeal being sold up there. You have chocolate, you have tea, you have coffee being sold up there. You also have candles and soap. You also have a lot of alcohol being sold up there. Things like brandy, wine, beer. You also have rum being sold up there. And this alcohol being sold at the market is actually really important. as well as the other items being sold at the market. Soldiers just receiving beef and flour, even being promised rum every day, only here at Ticonderoga getting that rum on rainy days, morale can suffer from not getting supplied with what's being promised. So a few things will help this morale. Obviously what's being sold at the market will help with that morale, but you also have other things being done to help with the morale of the troops. Instead of just supplying the soldiers with a pound of flour and a pound of beef, the general orders will tell the commissary to start issuing, because they have plenty of flour, on top of that pound of beef and pound of flour, an extra pound of flour, or an extra half a pound of flour, depending on the time, which, of course, you know, as a person today, an extra pound of flour a day doesn't sound very appealing, but we know that this will help morale. Private Ezra Tilden, who's probably the biggest complainer in the Army, will write in 1776, the same day that the order goes out to issue extra flour, he will write that order out in his diary, and at the end of writing that, he writes "good order" in big giant letters with exclamation points. So that order, of course, worked, but it was only a temporary resolution. Things will, of course, get better as the harvest season approaches. Vegetables will be sent up here. You have corn and turnips being shipped up here for the soldiers to be issued out. And of course, things get really good come the end of the year. Come October 28th, when the British will advance to this post and then realize it's too strong to attack and leave, you have a lot of troops being allowed to go home. The garrison will shrink to just the 4th Pennsylvania Battalion, as well as Asa Whitcomb's regiment from Massachusetts. Just a few men left here for that winter. Colonel Anthony Wayne has a bunch of food left in the stores, and he knows how long that food will last. So to increase the morale of his soldiers, who are, of course, expected to stay here longer than their service had required, he will start issuing them a pound and a half of beef a day to help with that morale issue. So things do end up getting better throughout the summer and into the fall of 1776. Yes?
Would all that beef be salted, or would they eat any, when the cows came in and were slaughtered, would they eat anything fresh?
They will eat fresh beef. As a Continental soldier, you are expected to get beef 5 times a day, pork 2 times a day. The pork is always salted. The beef, out of 2 of those 5 days, is supposed to be fresh. However, it's not always the case.
Right. Winter.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Now, how, of course, all this food is coming up here. All this food is at the market. How are soldiers getting this food? How are they even eating this food? A soldier on a daily basis is waking up, maybe eating breakfast of chocolate, maybe bread, then going out and working until the midday, coming in to eat, and then working the rest of the day. So how's all the cooking being done? Well, you have your commissary department here. You also have the quartermasters from each regiment being issued from the general stores here food for that regiment. Now, the Army is broken down into messes. 6 soldiers each mess. Out of each mess, they vote in a cook for them. The cook doesn't have to do all the other work in the Army. And the cook, on a daily basis, is going to show up to their company's camp kitchen, which is what this is. But only showing up here after he has collected his messmates, as well as himself, collected all their rations. So on a daily basis, anywhere from about 6 pounds of beef to 12 pounds of beef to 6 pounds of flour to 12 pounds of flour a day is what that mess cook is receiving from his quartermaster or even from the commissaries here in the fort. You have, of course, that mess cook going up trying to supplement just that beef and flour with things that are provided by the market. So he would have to collect money from his messmates, go up to the market, purchase those things. Finally, after getting all of those items, coming here to the company camp kitchen, where he, as well as about 10 other cooks, would be cooking around this trench. This is just for one company of about 60 soldiers. So you can imagine the 4th Pennsylvania Battalion made up of 10 companies. So imagine about 10 of these behind that regiment's camp. But that's just one regiment here. There's a lot of regiments here, so there are a lot of these. And of course they're cooking in the trenches like this because it will concentrate the heat onto what you're cooking and consolidating that heat in the earth, cutting back on firewood. Imagine cooking on open fires, the heat escaping everywhere. Of course, you're going to burn through a lot of firewood, which means you have to cut a lot of firewood, which means you have to take the time to cut that firewood, which pulls you away from doing other duties like digging trenches and fortifying this location. So little details in the Army make a huge difference for the functioning of the Army. But this is where that mess cook, as well as those other mess cooks in the company, would be located every day, cooking basically a stew. Now that fresh beef that's being issued on those days, the mess cooks, they try to get away with actually cutting chunks of that fresh beef off and broiling it while they're cooking the main meal. This is being seen done by the officers here in 1776, and this is a problem because that mess cook has now cut off a piece of the calorie intake for his entire mess, which is a problem. If the soldiers don't get the right amount of calories that's being issued to them, they're going to lose the energy they need to do all this work. So regulations go out to never broil food, never divide the food before it is cooked. Keeping that food together in one pot, keeping that pot together. Also, when you broil food, the fat will drip off. That fat, although sounds healthy today to broil the food and have the fat drip off, not in the time period. They need every single calorie they can get to do all this work. So generally boiling a nice stew is what's being done. And with all that flour making dough boys. The Army will even move to regulate this so much that they will have officers on duty every day out of each company to make sure that they are visiting twice a day the company camp kitchens to make sure that the mess cooks are abiding by the rules.
There's no ovens to bake bread?
There are ovens to bake bread. Bread is being issued out, but not on a large scale. You have 10,000 soldiers here. There are only a certain amount of bakers.
Right.
And you have ovens down below at the Old French Village, as well as ovens in the Old French Fort here, running 24/7. There's just simply not enough ovens, not enough manpower to produce enough bread to issue out to every soldier every day. So they're making dough boys, basically dumplings out of the flour and water mixture in their pots, in their stews. You could also buy bread from the market as well. That was one of the items being sold at the markets. However, by period paintings and drawings of camp kitchens and soldiers cooking in these camp kitchens, you see an oven put on top. Very temporary field oven made out of the same clay that came from the trench that they dug out, which we have here. And in those paintings you see a big fire going in that. So if the mess cooks had the ingredients to bake their own bread out of the flour they're being issued, they could, of course, bake it in those field kitchens as well.
Kind of fortunate that the soil works well.
Yes, here at Ticonderoga the soil is very clayey, as well as very rocky, but it makes for pretty good camp kitchen material. However, when armies encamp in places like Yorktown, Virginia, the British Army, where it's just all sand, they cannot do this. And they will burn through their resources very quickly. And it will take longer to, of course, cook their meals. So it's the materials sometimes can make or break an army.
Mm-hmm. Would they have that canopy of the...
Yes, this is a suggested kind of canopy in a military manual for the covering of a camp kitchen to shade the cooks during the day, as well as in the winter to protect the camp kitchen from collapsing and falling apart, as well as to hold the heat in to keep the mess cooks warm. Now, all of this supply line, all of the food being sent up here, of course, allows an army to stay healthy enough, to have the energy enough to build a huge line of fortifications that extended from Mount Independence across the lake to Mount Hope in the modern town of Ticonderoga. And when the British come down here, they will successfully defend those lines just by showing up to their alarm post, showing the British Army that they're healthy and ready to defend those lines. That's enough for the British to say that this place is too strong, the garrison is too healthy and disciplined to take this place, and they turn around. So supply lines, of course, will make or break an army. Generally, when an army leaves here at Ticonderoga, it is because their supply lines have broken. John Burgoyne fails at Saratoga because his supply line breaks. The French army in 1759, when they leave here, their supply line breaks. There's only 400 soldiers left here, with direct orders to leave when it's attacked. So generally, if you have a good supply line, you have a successful army. So that's really the importance of all of this. But with that said, if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I know Rich wants to get you back inside right in about a minute, 38 seconds.
So did I understand that they had company bakers who supplied bread for everybody?
Not company bakers. They had company camp kitchens, and in that company was about 10 cooks. Each cook cooking for 6 soldiers.
Okay,
That
so
cook, if the company made a field oven, could be baking bread. Each one of them.
As well as
Yep.
Would you guys